Yeah. Actually, it'd be really good to just get, for those of you who don't know, the rest of the Bangkok team. Can the Bangkok team stand up? Are you here? Where are the Maccas? There she is. There we go. So this is Chris and Jodie McCartney, and they've got 2 little girls, and Jodie's pregnant with another McCartney. And Rod, where's Rod? Over there, Rod. He's been living there for 5 years, and the Maccas 3 years. So, yeah, just if you want to talk a little bit to them afterwards, that'd be good. Can I talk into the microphone? Yep. Well, it was actually really good that Daryl set the scene so that, can you just keep in mind, swearing's in the middle box, right? Tell my mum that too, will you? Actually, Ash and I, we've been on a 3-month sabbatical, and we went back to work on Thursday, so it's been a really interesting time and a great time of refreshing for us. And for me, I guess some of the stuff I wanted to share is some of the things that we reflected on kind of the last 10 years of ministry, and this is our 19th year of ministry together. And I remember thinking when we first started out, and Daryl was our big guru then, thinking, gee, you know, when we've done 5 years of ministry, we'll really know what we're doing and we won't make any mistakes. And then about 10 years, I remember thinking, oh, when we've been in ministry, 15 years, we'll really know what we're doing, and, we won't keep on making the same mistakes. And then now I can just say, it just is, isn't it? Life is just hard and you stuff up, and that's just the journey of being a growing Christian. And so I'm not going to try and analyse what maybe how many more years it will be. But in saying that, for us it's really exciting to have Richard Rohr coming today, and we're really nervous about meeting him because he is a bit of a guru for the team. And I would have to say that probably nearly everyone in the team has been able to sustain their ministry in some way because of the personal and spiritual development that we have been able to do, that has been helped along by listening to Richard's teachings. And, we have a bit of a joke in the team. Ash will ring me up sometimes in Bangkok and say, Ange, where are you? And I'm saying, I'm on a date with Richard. And I'll be driving around Bangkok with my tape, because we're not that sophisticated for CDs, listening to his series on Mark for the 3rd time round. And I think Lindy Croucher has been known to go away on weekends with her Richard Rohr books and tapes. And we really are really indebted to great leaders like him and Daryl and Mick Duncan and others who have allowed us to not just live the dream that we feel like we live, but to sustain it and to continue to be excited about what God's doing. And I just encourage any of you to, I think it's really good for us to honour our elders in the faith who've gone before us. And I know tonight will be a launching of Athol Gill's book, or a relaunch, and guys like John Smith and that'll be there. And for us, well, I'm not the younger ones anymore, but for you younger ones in the team, they have trod the path before us, and they have broken down a lot of the barriers for us. And for us, the struggle has been less in some way because of those that have gone before us. So we're not talking about what we do in a vacuum. It's actually as part of the bigger picture of the radical disciples of Christ across the world who have gone before us. So one of the passages that's gone through my head for the last probably 6 weeks or so is Habakkuk. Has anyone read Habakkuk? It's got a great name. I remember getting my mouth washed out with soap for calling him Habakkuk. And the Old Testament has got some really sort of strange books, and so I've never been a super big fan of the Old Testament, but in Habakkuk I really can relate to him. Did I? Habakkuk? Middle box. But, there's not a lot known about him as a prophet, and that was good because I didn't have to read all these big, thick commentaries and concordances about him. But one of the differences in his writings to a lot of the other prophets is he wasn't so much prophesying to the people. He was actually like talking to God and actually complaining to God. So we wonder actually if he might have been a New Zealander, because sorry guys. But the first 2 chapters, he's kind of whinging to God about, why is this all going on? Why is there suffering? And why are the good people struggling and suffering and having terrible things happen to them? And why are the bad people prospering? And then what's kind of exciting about him is he doesn't stay in the why. He moves on to the, Habakkuk 3, which is where he talks about, well, even in the midst of this, God, you were in it. And to that final kind of passage, which was a song that we all sang in the 80s, and the 80s is back. So we're hoping some of those songs might come back. With the AC/DC, the 80s are back, trust me. And you know that song we used to sing, though the fig tree does not blossom and there be no fruit on the vine and there's no olives in the olive field and no animals in the stalls, yet will I rejoice in the Lord. And for me, I could say that, I would like to say that my journey is one of Habakkuk's, where I can say that, even if everything's gone to crap and nothing's going right, yet will I rejoice in the Lord. But I think the true journey that we're all on is trying to get to that point where we can say that all the time. I can say that sometimes, but sometimes I'm like, God, why? What were you thinking? And certainly our journey in Thailand is, we've seen that. You know, one example, I remember thinking, you know, we've got a lady, and I'll call her Nook, and Nook she's had 10 children. And many of you who have been to Thailand will have met M, who's a young boy with an intellectual disability who walks around our community centre and who we help support to live with his grandma. We have 2 other really cute kids of hers that have been in our preschool that a lot of you would have been touched by. And Nook is very, very ill with AIDS and very ill with mental health issues, and she slashes, so she slashes her throat and her arms, and she lives pretty well under a tree, and the children beg on the road, and it's a really chaotic, terrible situation. 6 out of the 10 children we're somehow trying to care for through our Thai staff by, you know, supporting them, be it with food for the family that are caring for them. And even in that compromised health state, she then became pregnant again. And, you know, I'm like, God, what were you thinking? Because at the same time, you know, a member of my own family who would be a great mum, who's a lovely Christian, works for the church and, you know, was struggle for 5 years to have a child. And then you have to say, God, what are you thinking? What were you thinking? And this poor little baby, we call him Ben 10. If you've got little kids, you'll know about Ben 10 and the Omnitrix and the DNA. And, you know, here's this little baby Ben who is under a bridge in a little hammock swinging. And we know that the oldest child, M, he was born healthy. And at 2 weeks old, he fell out of this little hammock, and all the adults around who were caring for him were all so drug affected that no one was able to pick him up. And so because of lack of oxygen to the brain, he's had a stroke, brain damage, and, you know, he walks around in our community just, you know, being shooed around like a dog, stray dog really, by people. And then you're just thinking, here's this other little baby, Ben. And he could, you know, with the right medication, there's a really good chance that he will not have to develop full-blown AIDS. But the chaos of this woman's life and the lack of power and systems available to be able to do something about that means it's very, very likely that, because he's not covered by his ARVs 24/7, she forgets to give the medication or runs out or can't find where it is, that he also will have a very short and tragic life. And so for me, I just look at this stuff and I just think, God, what were you thinking? You know, why could that happen? And there's no answer to that, is there? And I know probably everyone in this room has those kind of, maybe a bit more spiritual than me, maybe you say, well, God's in this. But I'm like, God, what were you doing? But we have that, don't we? And not just in a slum in a third world, it's everywhere. And just coming to Australia, and I was preaching in Perth on the weekend, and the 2 churches that I preached at had really significant tragedies going on in amongst their community. And I just felt God saying, wow, bad things happen everywhere, and life is painful and hard and a struggle. And Jesus never promised that that wouldn't happen. Somehow I think when I was converted in the 80s, we were all converted by that whole fear kind of thing. If you don't pray the prayer right now and you get hit by a bus, you'll go to hell kind of thing. And I remember the guy talking about, you know, are you a Christian? If you were hit by a bus tonight, would you go to heaven or hell? And I'm like, oh, this is crap, that middle box. And just thinking, and then we went down to the beach. It was down at Phillip Island, and I remember I got dumped in a wave. And if you've ever been dumped in a wave, you're under the water and you really think you're going to die, and it's kind of like the whole thing's in slow motion. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to go to heaven. I'm not going to go. So I got out of the water and I recovered a bit. I grabbed that guy and I'm like, you got to pray the prayer. And he goes, oh, we'll wait. We'll get back to the camp. And but we could be hit by a bus on the way home. I was really, and I was actually staying with someone in Perth who was converted under that thing. I think we all thought it was the end times. Jesus was coming back any day. Who saw that movie? I wish we'd all been ready. Remember that movie? And 2 men walking up a hill and someone disappears. And you know, there was probably a lot you could say that was wrong about that theology and the fear tactics. But it brought out some people, like we didn't think we had a choice but to serve God. We had to get on with it because it could be the end times, and we didn't have time to do another course and get a, go and try this and try that, and then in a few years or so, we just thought it's the end times. We just got to do something because God could come back, and I could be watching Australia's Biggest Loser or all these other reality TV shows, Master Chef or something. I could get caught doing that. My daughter and I have to confess, we are fans of reality TV. Is there anyone brave enough to raise their hand? Somebody must be watching this. Everywhere I go, people go, oh, we don't watch reality TV. It's terrible, especially in the church. But it's what's on every channel, and somebody must be watching it because they do their market. Does anyone here watch it? Master Chef, come on. Thank you. So that again, middle box, isn't it? It's not good or bad. We're not the normal Christians, Robin's saying. Yeah. So for me, I've probably lost where I'm going. But for me, I just think that one of the things that Ash and I have just been reflecting on in our sabbatical is that, yeah, life is tough. And life is tough actually for everybody. And the thing is that if we know that life was promised to be tough, but Christ is there with us in the midst of it, there's no way to be safe. You can't, all these ads that, safety, and my kids go, oh, all the rules in Australia, you've got to have car seats and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And I mean, people are just nervous wrecks because before I lived in Thailand, I thought if I drove to the end of Kelvin Grove, which is a tiny little street, without my seatbelt on, I might get crashed and die. And the safety stuff's good, I'm not poo-pooing it. But we live in Bangkok where people don't have that choice. There's a whole family on a motorbike, being the McCartney family, driving their kids to school. But, the poor don't have those options of that same kind of safety, and you can't live with that fear. And the other thing is that it's actually a healthier way probably to see the world because bad things happen. And in Australia, I think people are trying to build up this thing that we can make ourselves safe, we can make our kids safe. And then I know that what happened to quite a few of my peers, when a tragedy happens, a child dies or their marriage breaks up or something terrible happens, they throw away their faith because they've built a faith on a God that promised nothing would go wrong. And actually for us, and I think for us, we've built our journey on a promise that the world is a bad place. Bad things happen and happen to all of us, yet God is with us in that struggle. And we've certainly seen God with us in that struggle in Thailand in the last 8 years. And the other real lesson that for Ash and I think, probably the last 10 years have been, is things aren't as they seem. Things are, we look at things and we think we know what's going on. And for us living in another culture, that's really highlighted, that you think you know what's going on. And I remember a few years ago, some of you have heard this story, there was a couple of women having a big fight out the front of our house. When you read books on Thai culture, when you're preparing to be a missionary there, they tell you about how quiet everyone is and no one raises their voice. And as a woman, you've got to be very quiet and demure. And everyone's like, what was God thinking sending Ange? And when you actually live there, you realise that's a load of rubbish that was written by some academic who, very high class person, because everyone does yell and scream, and so I was thank you God. But these two women were having a screaming match out the front of our house, and then a guy came along, one of the women went away, and the other woman's got this big plank of fence post, which is quite common in the slum to see a parent or someone walking around with a fence post or a big stick because they're mad at someone and they're going to give someone a hiding. And anyway, so she starts beating into this guy, and he's kind of just standing there taking it, and he's bleeding a bit, and he kind of walks off. And after it had all died down, I'm sitting with the women just out the front of our place, and because we all sit there and pretend you can't see, because it's like so closed in space, you can't get involved really, and you just have to pretend not to look. So we all sit like this, and then just sort of pray that it's going to be okay, and occasionally try to intervene in a roundabout way. Anyway, so I'm running by, have I understood what was going on? So I understood that the women were fighting because this bloke had slept with both of the women. And so they were mad at him and they're mad at each other. And the girls go, no, you don't get it, no. He always sleeps with both of them. They're both his wives. One's his gik and one's his wife. And Thai culture, it's a polygamous society. But what he's mad about is one of them, she has HIV, and he didn't use a condom when he slept with her and then slept with the other one. So I'm thinking, Australia, this would be what the fight would be about. And I was kind of close. I thought I understood what it was. But actually the reality was just slightly right off my page because that's, it's just totally new to me. And I kind of sense God saying to me that is what a lot of life is like, that we see things, we think we know what's going on, We think we know how God is going to work. We think we know the program that's going to reach the poor and the best way to minister, and yet the reality might be just slightly off. For Ash and I, the first 3 or 4 years where our Thai wasn't very good, again we thought after we've been there 5 years we'll speak really good Thai. We're now going after we've been there 20 years we'll speak really good Thai. We would find out often after we had been involved in something actually just what God had done. Like we were at somebody's sort of point of coming to Christ and we had no idea, and 3 months later he was saying, thank you, you prayed for me when I came to faith and I wanted to give my heart to Jesus. I'm like, did we? Oh, okay. So it's been a matter of really not knowing what's going on in the slum and just trying to run to keep up with what God's doing. And Daryl talked about the missionaries, often the image of missionaries going to another place and bringing God with them in their pocket. And we believe very strongly, that God is at work in all of these places in the world. And that our call as missionaries is to go into those communities and work out what's God doing. And for me, often it's try not to get in the way too much, and is to partner with him and maybe give a name to what God is already doing in the lives of people. And that means we don't have much control, and that can be a very interesting journey, and it's a very exhausting way to work. It's a very kind of low-key but very time-consuming, exhausting way to work. But that is really because we're on that journey too, and who are we to tell a Thai what it means to be Thai and Christian? We don't know. We're still trying to work out what it means when Thais say certain things. So we kind of really sense that God was at work in this community, and for those first few years, all the missiology books talk about those first 5 years are your learning years, and then after your next 5 years are kind of your growth years, and then it's the 10 to 15 years, they're your impact years. And that's very true. Into about the 4th year point, I just thought, how are we ever really going to be any use in this culture? We can barely speak the language. We never know what's going on. We're really struggling. And yet it was at the 5-year mark that all of a sudden God just broke things open and we saw some real amazing things happen, to the point where the last 2 years everyone's been run off our feet trying to keep up with all these. It's like these little explosions going off everywhere and amazing opportunities. And in a sense, all of us feel like we probably live a bit of a missionary's dream in that community with things that just open up, and how can we not get involved? And it just seems a no-brainer to get involved. And one of those things for us has been little businesses and setting up businesses. And those you've heard about the Klong Toy handicrafts, and we never really wanted to do handicrafts. I'm not crafty or arty at all. And but God was doing that. The women were making things, and they knew we were coming to Australia every year, and they'd give us these ugly kind of bracelety things, and we'd go to sell them for $5 and people would give us 10. So we did that for nearly 2 years, and then eventually I just thought, all right, God, I get it. Let's just do this, even though it's something so out of my comfort zone. I'm not a business person, can't manage money at all, and yet this little business, I remember saying to Liz, was it probably last year, Liz, we don't want to grow it beyond 3 million baht. 3 million baht's like, I don't know, it's about 100,000 Aussie dollars. And Liz was quiet for a minute. I could hear her brain ticking away, or that was the calculator. And she goes, Ange, we've already done 5 million baht. And it's like, oh, okay, well, we're not going to grow it beyond 5 million baht. And then Liz is saying, well, just recently, in the last 8 months, it's already 6 million baht. And so you can't put a lid on what God's doing. And so we're kind of joining in with that. I could say we've gone into this poor slum and, we really believe in community development. It's true, we do. And we really had a heart to start a ministry to employ ex-prisoners and women in bar work, so they had a true alternative to bar work. And that wouldn't be a lie, except it's not the truth. When you look at all, I look back and I look at all the people involved in our project, and they are ex, maybe not so ex, bar girls and women and men out of prison. But God drew people together. We didn't go... there's kind of that whole urban myth that comes back from overseas. We go into this thing and all this stuff happened, and actually if you dig a little deeper, it's not quite as it seems. Basically, a little group of women who started, I didn't know what their issues were. They had something they could do. They wanted me to help sell it. It's much less romantic than it can be in the retelling. And so I'd encourage some of you, I know some of you are battling away in those kind of things, and then you hear these stories from overseas, largely not true, about we went in there and then what that one, the whole jail came to Jesus? Anyway, if you trace it back, it's always... I know there's disappointed people here, isn't there? There's always someone's cousin's auntie who told the story. It's, in the 80s it was that these guys were drilling into the centre of the earth and they heard this wailing of gnashing of teeth. and it was someone's cousin's uncle, and, you know, you trace it back. It's a bit like the woman who had the pimple on her face, and when she squeezed it, baby spiders came out. Urban myths. And the Christian mission field is full of these urban myths. And we can perpetuate them in by telling you something that's not a lie, but it's not quite how it happened. So for me, just things aren't always as they seem. And even for us, we have this fantastic handicraft thing. Liz has got handicraft sold in every state of Australia. We sell in America and England, all that. And it's going fantastic, and the men and women are earning double the minimum wage and working short hours, and it's very flexible. It's a back-to-front model because someone walks in the door crying and we work out what they can do, and then we think about selling it later. And God's been really good to us in that. And but the reality is I find out after about a year and a half, these girls that have been coming out of prison and staying with one of our other neighbours, we've got this little sewing room, they're getting paid 150 baht to sew a bag. And our neighbour, who was their kind of jail cell mum in jail, she's taking a cut, she's taking 70. So this is our little fair trade project, and for a year the women sewing those bags that we've been out selling, you know, it's all fair trade. This woman's taking a cut and not doing anything except introducing people to me. And, you know, the other side is we've got lots of women who are now earning a really good salary, and that's fantastic, isn't it? But it doesn't mean that the other underlying issues are not still there. So for some of our men and women, that means they got more money to gamble. They got more money to buy drugs. And so that's where we don't control what God is doing, but we know God is working in their hearts. There is a choice, there is a little opening, and we work together closely, and it's a journey, isn't it? And so there's no silver bullet. There is really no silver bullet. And we've got 8 little businesses going. God kind of gave me a vision last year of seeing all people who work really hard in the slum who have a skill, but there's no money to be made in that community, and particularly now they have really the shipping, which is the slum is built on the port, so the shipping's almost dried up, and that's the casual work that was keeping these families going. And so things are really bad in the slum. So there's no money going around except in drugs pretty much, and the handicrafts. And so I saw that there were these people who were, you know, faithfully selling their little bits of sushi for 15 cents at the market, and other people with gifts and things they could do, but not making any money. And what we can do as a UNO team, we have heaps of wealthy contacts in the expat community. And so we started with this little vision of how do we find people with a skill within the slum and connect them with customers outside of the slum. So all you need for that to work is a good brochure, apparently. We have Leanne in Bangkok, one of our volunteers, and she's great at making brochures. So we make a little brochure, and now we have this small business. So we have a cooking school. Anyone been to Thailand and done one of those cooking schools where they take you on a market tour? And well, we thought, why not a slum cooking school? My neighbour, she's called Pooh, and so we want to call it the Pooh Food Cooking School. But she's called it Helping Hands Cooking School. And so why not? Why not give people a real experience of life in the slum, but at the same time they build a business for her? And so customers book through Jodie or myself, and they come in groups of up to 8, and she takes them on a tour of the local market and teaches them how to cook a few dishes. Robin's done it. Cooking with Pooh is great, yes. And you know, the interesting thing is, just towards I think it was the end of last year, Pooh came to me, and she's not a Christian. She's been my neighbour for 10 years ago when we had our first sabbatical. She was our neighbour then, and the whole time since we've been there, the last 8 years. And she said, look, I want to give you 10% of all the profits so you can use for the poor kids over there, which over there is like 200 metres away where the community centre is, where we work. And so for me it was really exciting. I was able to say, you know, that in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that's what people did. And so she's all really excited, and I say, you know, but now in the New Testament times we kind of think of it more as it's all God's, and so we're giving it all to God. And we got her to think and dream about how that money could be used maybe to help start other businesses. So at Easter we have a little small house church that started, and she paid for our house church camp from the profits of her cooking school. And we were able to take, how many people? 30 plus people out of Bangkok down to, our landlord has a little village kind of bungalow things, down to the beach to have, we didn't know it was Easter actually. In Thailand you'd never know if it was Easter or Christmas. You know it's New Year's and Valentine's Day, that's about it. But I think it was actually Easter for our little church camp on the beach. And Pooh paid for it, and so the people were indebted to her, not to us as the Westerners. And so for me that was really exciting. And so that's the hope that we see with some of these things. We have a sushi, we do a delivery of sushi, so we have a little lady who makes sushi in the slum Here's a picture. Again, it's just a good brochure. You hand it around in the hotels and the condominiums and suddenly you have a little business going. And so in the slum, she can sell these sushi. They look really cute, don't they? For $5. But I worked out, well, if we sell them out of the slum, we can sell them for $7. We still undercut all the hotels and shops, and but she makes good money. So people ring in an order, and then her son, who's on a motorbike, can drive them and deliver them. And so, again, we have a catering. We do children's birthday parties. There's nobody to compete with us. We've just been really lucky. Someone asked us if we could cater for one of my son's friends, actually. His mum said, oh, could the cooking school lady cater for a birthday party? And then all these really wealthy expats come to it. Well, suddenly we're booked out for children's birthday parties, and we charge $5, and the nearest competition is Novotel, who charge like $15 a head. So we're now doing all these seminars, and she's actually been catering for Alpha courses that various churches are running around Bangkok, which is just great. But we've seen in that God is also working in her life. And seeing Pooh being able to mentor some of the others. We have a van hire service, so if you're in Bangkok, you want to hire a minivan, there's one you can do. And the McCartneys are about to start the first op shop in Thailand. I am excited because I really miss... But we have all these people that are in Thailand for 3 years, and then they go and they want to give us all their stuff for the poor. And the reality is most people that live in our slum don't care if the kids are wearing Oshkosh jeans or Jag jackets. They need the money to feed their kids. So we've had a thing, we said, if you donate things to us, can we have permission to sell them? And so people will have... Jodie was just telling me about one of our neighbours, or her neighbours the other day, who there was some clothes given from a mum's group, and they found beautiful, beautiful baby clothes, and they were able to sell a whole lot of things and make some money themselves, and then make up these baby bundles all off their own accord and go around and give them to other really poor families in the slum. So again, it's the Thais helping the Thais. And so that's been really exciting. And so I will draw the line. Jodie McCartney and Lindy are very famous for furnishing all the houses with things they find at hard garbage sales. But we have had to draw the line at pea-stained mattresses. Actually, Daryl Gardner tells an interesting story. When we were first running youth homes and taking in homeless kids, Daryl said, they had this lady that was known as Mrs. Chip Cups. And every time she had any chipped crockery in her house, she'd think, I'll go and donate that to the boys' home. So his home was always getting these boxes full of chipped cups and plates donated to them. And I think we've gone one better. I think we've got, I don't know if it's a miss or a Mr. Really, it's hard to tell sometimes in Thailand, Mr. and Mrs. used underwear. And so I do, used and stained underwear. And it does get me thinking, donation is not, sometimes it's just dumping crap, isn't it? And I know, and over the years we have spent hundreds of dollars on tip fees, getting rid of donations that Christians won't use for themselves because it's not good enough for their family, but the poor will have it. And it's sad, eh? It's not the widows' might. It's not giving out of our sacrificially. It's giving the stuff we don't want. All the if we get any more Happy Meals donated to kids in Happy Meal toys to kids in the slum, it's just like, don't buy the Happy Meal. Give them the money. So anyway, that's just beside the point. But I can tell you these stories of what's happened with all these little businesses that are going, and it sounds exciting and it sounds great, but yet it's fraught with problems. So Pooh and her husband are doing well. They've both got these businesses going. They're employing other people in the slum. And Care, Pooh's husband, his family, their business was actually trafficking women in the sex work into Hong Kong and Singapore. And he's grown up in a family doing that, and his job was to sort of like a bodyguard, locking up the little room, and they also were into the betting on the football and stuff. And so he's got this family. I think at one stage nearly all of them were in prison. And so they're getting out of jail and they're coming for handouts. And in Thai culture, you cannot say no to your family. You bring bad luck on yourself. So all of a sudden they're finally getting ahead. And now I watch them working really hard, paying off all of their relatives' debts. And I just think, was this, it was better when they didn't have money. And yet they would say their quality of life is way better because they work a lot less hours and they have the money to help the family because they would have still had to help pay off the debts otherwise. So it's never that. In the handicrafts, this woman doesn't like that woman and this one's gone off with that one's bloke. And it's just, community development is all very nice in a book, but it's very good unless you have people involved. And then... And the other side of it is, the whole thing of as Westerners, you're trying not to be, you want to empower the people. And, we're very much committed to that model. But a lot of the time we're there to prevent the punch-ons, to prevent this one ripping that one off. And you're trying to do that in an empowering way, which is exhausting. So you're looking like you're not really leading anything, and you're trying to get people moving. And so it has to be both. I think, the amount of times people have come to Bangkok and said, oh, there's this program in this country, and if you just get micro loans going, or if you just get this, and then all the people in that village, they get loans and they all pay it back. And again, urban myth. Those things are good and pleasing to God in and of themselves, and they're not bad things. They are actually on the good list, and God calls us to do those things, but they're not the silver bullet. There's no silver bullet. And I think probably those of us in the West, we're constantly looking for the latest gimmick. If we just have this program, and in the end, it's one with one. It's pouring out our lives and walking in the struggle and the suffering of our neighbours, and making sure that we place ourselves in living situations where we meet the one that God's calling us to journey with. And these are all good things. We want to be trying to create change, but in the end, as Habakkuk can say in the end, even though nothing's working, it's all gone to crap, all these businesses collapse tomorrow, and we've seen in the financial crisis what's happened across the world, I can still say, yet will I rejoice in the Lord. And, that's the hope that we have for the communities that we work in. And I would like to say, we always say, you can't lead someone where you haven't been but yourself. So it's a real challenge, isn't it, that I can say that? Because I know I go to the ATM and there's no money there, and I'm not, yet will I rejoice in the Lord. I'm in the middle bracket again. And I get scared. And I'm like, these guys that live in the slum may never leave that slum. They may never have anything. But what they can have is, yet will I rejoice in the Lord, and God will use them. And we're seeing another really exciting thing is with our little house church. And Rod has been discipling his housemate, a guy called Jim. And, I have to admit, I get a bit jealous, Jim, because Jim is one of those guys that when he prays, God does these miracles. And I think I'd almost given up on miracles. The struggle of journeying with people and seeing not a lot of change. And, Jim prays for silly things like that, the fake cable TV. We get fake cable TV and the channels change and all that. So you might be watching a movie. We get Al Jazeera 1 minute and then it's the God channel, Or you're watching something and then the Bundesliga soccer comes on. And so, Jim's praying because he loves Liverpool, his team. And the Liverpool channel comes on. And I'm like, God, why would you do that? And then let one of our friends has just died. That's not why, God. So I'm back at the beginning of Habakkuk. But anyway, Jim, God has really just touched his life, and Rod's been journeying with him, and he really leads our little church. And he has to, because the Thai Bible is almost impossible for even a Thai to read. The language is so complicated. And so Jim has to read it, and Crew Mao and others who are journeying with us. And just to see some exciting things. We had a guy... and we all knew that things weren't going well for this friend of ours, and he's, beating up his kids, and he's having all different women over. His wife's in jail because she stole the railway tracks. In Thailand, you recycle everything. Australia thinks we're all up there with recycling. Thailand's been doing it for like 100 years. And so everywhere around the slum and outside the slum, there are little places where you go and sell paper, or you sell the plastic bottles, and metal. It goes by weights. Obviously, she's clever, eh? Metal weighs a lot. The railway track metal is really heavy. So anyway, she gets caught, of course, because she has to carry it past the police station. But anyway, so this guy's really struggling. He's on his own with 2 kids. He works with us. And so we knew things were going really bad, and all the neighbours, can't do anything in secret in the slum because all our rooms are all joined together. So everyone knows everyone's everything. And I was just thinking, what do we do? And things were tense between him and me because I confronted him about something to do with his son. And anyway, so we were at the Macca's house that night, and I remember him saying, I want to give the talk. And I'm like, that'd be interesting, Again, we don't try and control things. We try and let God sort of do it. And so that leads to some very interesting theology. I'm not sure which of the 3 boxes, and maybe we have a 4th box, But anyway, and he said, on Tuesday night, God came to me in a dream, and he said, what are you doing? You've got to grow up. You've got 2 kids. You shouldn't be doing this. And you've got to get your act together. How powerful is that? And I'm like, well, there you go. It's good that I didn't know what to say and didn't have the right Thai words. And so we're seeing that kind of thing. And anyway, when Jim prays, all these miracles happen, and he is also helping to disciple this guy. And I'm very famous for losing things, particularly keys. Anyone who's lived with us in Melbourne knows we never have a key to our house. And Bangkok's no different. If you want to get into our house, just ask one of any neighbours or any of the team. And I'd lost the keys to the community centre and motorbike and different things. And there's not a lot in here for me. It's all, I live outside of my body a bit, so it's all out there. So I'm like, oh, I lost the keys. I'm really mad at myself. And it was been about a month or 6 weeks. So I was saying, just kind of for mucking around, Jim was sharing how God had done this miracle again. And I was like, isn't it unfair how God seems to answer all Jim's prayers? And the women were going, yeah, why doesn't he answer mine? Oh, couldn't God just find my keys? So Jim goes, well, actually tonight I really feel that we're going to pray and you have to close your eyes. And if you don't close your eyes, your miracle won't be answered. So I'm like, oh, pressure. And actually I was a bit scared, back to the 80s, we're all scared, I better listen. And so we're praying and got our eyes closed. And then I open my eyes at the end of it and there's a set of keys in the middle. So I go, just for a bit of mucking out of it. Oh, it's my key. And as I look, they're my keys. And I'm like, oh. And Rod and Krumau, another lady in our group, had found my keys the week earlier and had set the whole thing up as a spoof. You all wanted me to tell you it was God had just made them miraculously. I know, but in saying that, Gong, another friend of ours who's in it, she hadn't cottoned onto all that. She'd kind of, missed all that conversation. So she goes, Ange, I really want to pray. I haven't seen my daughter in 10 years. And I want to pray to see my daughter. And I'm like, whoa, pressure. She doesn't know it was set up. Oh, dear God, she's going to put all that thing and she's just a really new journeying with Jesus person. And anyway, that was Friday night. On the Monday. So I'm like, ye of little faith going, oh, that's great. Not like, let me pray with you and we'll believe in it together. And on Monday we get to work and she runs a coffee shop out in front of, that's another little business that we have. And she's dragging some girl behind her who looks terrified. She's crying and going, this is my daughter. She came to see me. So I'm like, whoa, God, you really do still do miracles. And for us, the exciting thing is things are not as they seem. Things just seem chaotic and dark and abusive and sad in the slum. And yet God is doing an amazing work under that. And I know for some of you in your communities, you're just thinking, this is just too hard. It's not going the way I want. But actually God is in that. And all the more in that because we can't be, because we're beyond our limits. And so for me, that was a real thing when we reflected on our sabbatical that God was doing. And again, just in closing, because I see Jim there, just that, in the end, that we want people that we journey with, we want the poor to be able to say, even though there's nothing, even though everything's turned to crap, yet will I rejoice in the Lord. He's the God of my salvation. And we can only share that if we believe that and we live that. And so that's a tough journey. We've just got to keep going. No, thanks, John.